based music and culture writer. So the next bit of the evening is an in-conversation event, which for a while has been billed as special guests, and I presume most of you know who those are now, but in case you don't, it's a real privilege and honour to welcome two founding members of Cabaret Voltaire, Chris Watson and Stephen Mallinder, please.
Evening.
Evening.
All right?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Welcome.
Hold on, we'll just drop in bits. There you go.
So this is a particularly nice welcome back for you, Chef, because I guess like geographically we had Western Works just around the corner, and we're here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of your debut gig, which is also just around the corner. So this is kind of like we're in the middle of that, right?
The epicenter of it, yeah, the early.
Let's just remember that there's two of us here out of the three.
Of course, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Richard.
So yeah, rest in power to Richard. To Richard, everyone.
Cheers, Richard.
So yeah, I guess, so obviously Tuesday was the 50th anniversary directly. So let's go back to that evening in particular. So 50 years, and we'll go back to the very beginning first, but given...
This sounds like an interrogation.
That's the plan.
Is this a hostage situation?
Well, which fits in nicely to what I think your gig was like for some people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So 50 years ago, I mean, it wasn't a typical gig, right? I mean, it was a gig effectively at a society for the science.
Science for people.
Yeah.
I was, at the time, working for British Telecom in telephone engineering, and there was a guy that I hung out with who was interested in creating something called Science for People, and they said, we have this event, and we've got this space at Sheffield University in the factory, where we've got a day where we like to publicise this Science for People. And I said, oh great, well I'm in a band, we could come and play. So that was it.
Trojan horse UAM. And what are your memories of that evening? Because I mean, correct me if this is wrong, but as I've read, it came over. There was two sets that evening. The first kind of went along right, the second of it effectively sort of ended in a bit of a riot, and there was Richard was using his clarinet as a baton, throwing his guitar into the audience. Mal, you ended up in hospital. So tell us from your memory, in your words, what was the first ever Cabaret Voltaire gig like those 50 years ago?
Well, for a start, it sounds like a good night out.
I can remember there was two sets. I can't believe
it could be inaccurate.
Because I can't believe that we would have managed to get away with
survive the first one.
Because if the second one was fucking like that, I mean, the first one wouldn't have been any different, really. So I didn't know. I can't remember there being two sets. I do remember my memory of it kind of is vague. That I can't remember whether the guy who Chris knew had asked Chris or whether he asked us when we got there, going, and what type of music do you play? And we were going, oh, all sorts. Do you do rock? Oh yeah, we do that. So I think the expectations from them compared to us were quite far apart. To be quite honest, I think we were quite indifferent. I felt we were a bit indifferent towards it in the sense that if this hostility was building up, I don't know whether we were immediately aware of it, because I think we were just going, we're just doing what we're doing. So I don't know. What can you remember that much of it, Chris?
I tell you what, my abiding memory is Richard with his jacket.
Yeah, the jacket was the key to it.
Yeah, fairy lights.
He came down with the jacket with fairy lights on.
Was it a rubber jacket of some description?
I think it was just something he got from an Oxford.
Okay.
Yeah. But he
it was plugged into the
mains. He plugged it into the mains. That was the best bit. He plugged it into the mains, which I from memory meant, one, he was like a proper fucking risk assessment. And the other thing was, he couldn't really move very far, because I don't think no one gave him an extension lead. It was like, we got an extension lead, so it wasn't like I could move around the stage. I think he was kind of plugged into the spot at that point.
And we had that tape loop of what had been a corporate sort of holiday, so-called.
Steam Hammer, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was from the harbour in
Ostend.
Ostend, yeah. This amazing percussion, which is, a lot of what we were about at the time. This sort of what we call a found sound now, but this incredibly rich, rhythmic, driving percussion.
That was effectively your drummer for the evening, a recorded sample of a Steam Hammer, right?
We didn't actually have a drum machine at that point, I don't think, did we, Chris? We hadn't got we got the far feasible, I don't think. We hadn't got it then.
But that was enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
That was really
like some of the stuff we've heard tonight, with respect to what we've heard, that really sort of powerful bottom end driving rhythm.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I guess one thing I wanted to ask is, obviously, we're talking about 75 here, but you guys formed in 73. And I think context is really important for the birth of Cabaret Voltaire, because obviously you are quite rightly lumped in as being sort of pioneers of the electronic movement that came out in the late part of the 1970s. But when we're talking in terms of timeline, you were so far ahead of things. Effectively, the birth of Cabaret Voltaire is closer to like Tony Christie era Sheffield than it is the electronic stuff that comes later. And so I'd be interested to know how you felt when you started about the wider musical landscape in Sheffield. Was there anything going on that was of any interest to you, that was inspiring in any way? Or was what you were doing like a retaliation against how perhaps safe and boring it was? What do you recall of Sheffield in 1973, 74 when you were starting out, and how you felt you fitted in or responded to that?
That's a really good point, because one of the reasons why we came into being was because of that, because everything around us was shit. It was, honestly, it was. We would go to, and it was go to places, and it was just deeply unsatisfying. And we were just interested in what we were interested in at the time as young people, or there was a wider group of people interested in just something else, than what we were hearing.
I don't think we were ever aware of any shit. There was nothing there to be aware of. I mean, historically, it was Dave Berry and Joe Cocker was, but Joe had left, and he wasn't a part of our world. But apart from that, it was really just club acts. It was sort of people who played the working men's clubs and played the top rank, and so there was live music. That's the difference. I mean, I suppose for us it was recorded music that you were into, because you didn't, particularly from the local level, you didn't see that. But so we didn't really, we weren't aware of any other people making music at all at that time, really.
What was inspiring, I think, with Mallinder, Richard and a group of us, we go to places which don't exist now, like the Sheffield Film Theatre, which is part of the library, which had all that's been sort of crushed, sort of like a funny, but we would go and see unclassified films and just be inspired by not only the films but the soundtracks and this idea of another world which was outside of where we were living at the time, but this suggestion of possibilities and potential, outside of this stuff that was on at the City Hall every other week. And we'd no idea in that sense, but it was, and we're interested by movement as well, Richard studied art, I did, I did politics, so it was this really interesting mix, so we're just exploring possibilities. As I'm sure people are now, people who are our age then, now doing, and being, and finding a challenge to exploit what they're interested in doing. That's, as far as I'm concerned, I can only talk to myself, but that's what we're interested in doing, that idea of exploiting something beyond what was all around us.
We were kind of excluded. Not that we were excluded, but it didn't really kind of exist for us. I mean, and just social life. I mean, it it was quite heavy in pubs and things like that. We used to go, I mean, we had forged union cards, and we used to go to see stuff at the university in terms of like music, but apart from that, you know, we did stuff because we had to create our own worlds, because the world that was in front of us wasn't really something we were that kind of connected or associated with, so we built our own world really, and as Chris said, film in many ways was as big a part of it, going to see weird Warhol films or Buñuel films or Fellini films or whatever it may be, you know, that was kind of something that was just as interesting.
Phase 4, I remember.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit 451. Things like that really would do now. You know, just open your ideas to imagination. Yeah, Razorhead. The you know, uncut version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was on there, you know, and then it sort of opens your ears as well as your eyes to the potential and possibilities.
Absolutely. And once you three are sort of settled into your groove a bit, so initially you started off in your attic, Chris, and I know sort of tape loops and sort of rudimentary experimentations, and once you start to find your way, and you know, Cabaret Voltaire has a bit of a sense of personality growing, did you guys have like a plan or an aim or a mission statement? Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you like know what you? Because you know, you mentioned like you know, you were railing a little bit against the sort of stale backdrop of what was at the time, but did you know what you wanted to be? How much of a plan was there to?
It was totally. We had a written plan.
we had a manifesto.
Well, some bands did from that era, you know.
No, we were just
making it up as you went
we were kind of just wanted to be the antithesis of what people were kind of into. We were the antimatter kind of thing of that, I think. And I think it was also, even though, because we're known for recording, there was a performative element to it in the sense that you wanted to do things that would kind of agitate, you know, in that sense we were kind of provocateurs really, so, you know, and so that was part of it, I think, really, just to annoy, really.
The Cabaret Voltaire, you know,
yeah.
It was the Zurich Cabaret Voltaire, you know, which was just total inspiration.
Because in early days, right, you would take your sort of sound recordings, play them in public toilets, you would strap them to the roof of vans and drive around the streets, right, for the sole purpose of, as you say, to wind people up and get a reaction. Was that a primary motivation, fundamentally, to piss people off in the early days?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Where did that come from? Would you describe that? Was that anger? Would you describe yourself as being sort of angry young men at the time?
I think it was youth. I think that was it. No, actually, we were quite fun people, believe it or not, weren't we? We had loads of mates. You know, I mean, the Cabaret Voltaire was really, you know, it is Richard, myself, and Chris, but it came from a core group of friends who were just into films, into going out, just enjoying ourselves. So there was a fun element to it, but that was kind of how we wanted to kind of form it. We were, I guess, us three became the nucleus, and we stuck together because music was. We kind of felt something was happening with it, yeah.
And we started off this conversation with talk of your first gig, but I'd be keen to know, do you remember what your second gig was? Because in a way that was even weirder than your first.
Is this a quiz?
Yeah.
Right, that's remarkable, because we're just moving house at the moment up into the Scottish borders, and Maggie has been here. Is Maggie here? She's
there.
So Maggie has been, I mean, she's like another member of the band from the start, you know, although she stood next to my son Lewis tonight, who was rather amused by all of this.
Just pretended to be his mum boy.
But Maggie found in our loft just recently this incredible, because we've been in Newcastle for 30 odd years, this incredible collection, this archive, this treasure chest of stuff, including a copy of the Sheffield Telegraph from, was it 1970? It was 1975 or 6?
Is that the one with the title in your head?
Yeah.
That's the third
Yeah,
thing.
let's not go on about that.
Got them tights.
Where, we did something again at the...
That was your Arts Tower.
Oh, yeah.
The Arts Tower
Second
one.
gig, though, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was at a school in Bury.
Oh, the Bury. Oh, God, yeah.
Where you played
yeah,
for
no.
4 minutes at 10 o'clock in the morning before the plug was pulled.
That's right, yeah. You had that stuck in on them, though, as well. You did wear it twice,
That's probably what I can't remember.
How did you land that, though? Because
That's when the fire alarm went.
I think a panicked teacher probably pulled it, right?
That's probably Kirky, didn't it? Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
that's just gone from my memory.
That's the Rob Dickinson one, isn't it? Yeah, it was Rob Dickinson. It was a weird one. He went to school, was it, with Pete's, I don't know, some kind of musician at the time, and they kind of funded music, I think, and I remember doing that. I don't know what really precipitated where it came from, but we ended up doing that thing for Rob Dickinson at the school, yeah. I remember we were drunk at 10 in the morning, and we were like, whoa, you shouldn't do that.
But let's remember, a lot of this also comes from, thank you to Sheffield University for the access to their VCS3 and Revox recording equipment in a room somewhere in the music department, which allowed us. Remember how we managed to negotiate that?
I don't know. I can't remember. It was somebody you knew. Who was that guy that we knew used to have those mad books with the film music and all that? Can you remember that?
Oh God, yeah.
Sorry, you're going to have to sit for a bit while me and Chris work out.
Remember we're in our 70s.
Yeah. It takes a while.
That's right. So we used to Sheffield University Music Department acquired this electronic music device, a VCS3, which was this beautiful
Used by
instrument.
famously.
Yeah. And then I eventually acquired one and sold it to Richard some years later. But and somehow, because they were interested in getting people other than music students to access this, we got access to this in the evenings. So we would come up to somewhere within the music department, the three of us.
Yeah, was it tapped?
Oh yeah, maybe. And access this in like this boxed room with a VCS3 synthesizer, a Revox 877 tape recorder, and we could record loads of stuff and then use it and then process it. And that was a thing that, because that was equipment and sound that were just inaccessible to us. And we were sort of liberated in a sense by that, and by what we could achieve. And could have been like 2 hours, 2-hour sessions we were there, and we came away with these tapes and then we worked with them.
And also as well, speaking of Eno and that synth, am I right in thinking that you did one of your earliest tapes, I think it was like limited edition, 25 copies or something like that, one person you sent to was Eno, and then did you follow him to a convention?
I didn't go. You went up to York, didn't you?
And then did Kirky follow him into the bathroom to find out if he'd got that tape, and then he subsequently accused Brian of pinching cab stuff for another green wall, which followed. Do you have any memories of sending that initial tape to Eno and his response?
I remember the journey to York because we remember getting on the train and we somehow it was a train that didn't stop at York. Going to somewhere like Northallerton.
I didn't go, so I was all right. I knew it was fraught with danger, actually.
I remember it was a really interesting series of lectures that he did called something like Art as a Technique for Survival, and he played this really good recording, an example of Lou Reed trying to play a guitar solo and making sort of 6 or 7 attempts at it, none of which worked, but then which were used it was a Velvet Underground track. And we were great fans, of course, as everybody was, of the Velvet Underground. It's inspirational music at the time. I don't remember the rest of it, but I'm happy to accept whatever you say.
And so look, I know we're a little bit tight on time, so I'm going to have to fast forward to some things, as much as I'd love to spend time, but I introduced this talking about the proximity to Western Works, and maybe I'm presuming a little bit of knowledge on the audience. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who know what Western Works was. For those that don't, this was the cab's HQ that was around the corner in an old, young socialist headquarters, effectively, that they recorded all of their albums at for the vast majority of which. And also, I think really keenly, when we're talking about history and legacy of Sheffield music, welcomed a lot of other people into that space who recorded their first ever things there. You know, that was a really vital thing, because at that time, I mean, there was, other than Ken Patton, I mean, there was bugger all, right?
There was no one.
Yeah.
No, there was. Yeah, there was. Yeah, I mean, we did. It's funny. I think we must have. We recorded loads of bands, Sheffield bands. You know, Russians, so Hollow, Deviated stuff in there. I can't remember whether people just said, "Will you do it?" Did you pay us?
Mostly negotiated in the Beehive.
Yeah, which we've just been in. For old time's sake, me and Chris had just been in the Beehive.
How was it?
I found cigarettes that I'd like to I don't smoke anymore, but it was nice to be reacquainted.
But also as well, for those that don't know, Western Works as well, which I think really significant, because, Manchester's really good at shouting about its history of music and stuff, and, perhaps Manchester's most successful and notorious electronic music.
Sorry to interrupt, remember, it's still, whatever they do, it's still on the wrong side of the pen.
But for those that don't know, the very first foundations that were laid for New Order, the very first recorded music that was ever made under the name New Order, was not done in Manchester. It was done in Sheffield, round the corner, with these guys in Western Works, with all of you taking turns of having to go on vocals. And so, I mean, would it be fair to say they came to you based on your sort of early explorations with electronic music to figure out where they wanted to go next?
No, they just came because they couldn't go to a commercial studio. Basically, they came because we were mates, literally that. I mean, there's a few elements. I mean, the main thing was that Ian had died a couple of months before, and they really, it was part of their process of getting over that and not just sort of stopping. So, but they couldn't really go into a studio in Manchester because obviously, people would have phoned up and people would, Enemy and all that. But they could come to us because we were mates and we weren't a commercial studio. So there was that. But also Bernard was very much at that time, and Ian as well, before he died, was very much into electronic music, and what we were doing was the direction, that they wanted to go in. So that was, it was considered in that sense in terms of what we were doing, that it kind of fitted what they wanted to do. But really, it was in large part because they could come and they could play and do some recordings without really fear of anything coming back. And so they were friends and they trusted us, and that was it, wasn't it? Really, I think, Chris.
Yeah, totally.
And one thing I wanted to ask, obviously you. In 78, you put out your debut record with Rough Trade, and obviously you're on the debut Factory Samplers as well. But I remember when I interviewed Richard years ago, like he spoke about in the period leading up to that, how he'd send tape after tape to various record labels, and he'd get letters back, and the key word on all of those letters would be like, unfortunately, or we regret to inform. And he'd said, and I don't know if this chimes with your memories and stuff, that he was so sort of desperate to try and find a way to fund music because there was just so little in the way of, there was no equivalent of Tony Wilson in Sheffield, there was no Zoo Records, none of that, no Bob Last, etc. That he was considering borrowing money from local gangsters to put out, the debut Crabs record. Do you recall that period before you started doing stuff with Rough Trade and whatnot as being particularly difficult, and just that people didn't quite grasp what you were doing yet? What do you recall of that period before people sort of really started to get what you were doing?
We did know gangsters, but I think, I don't know. It's funny actually. I think what we realised was that we couldn't get, probably there was never going to be a record label that was going to bring it out that moment in time. But what was happening and what was part of that period was journalists were kind of recognising a change in what was going on. So that was the thing that we did, was to then target, you know, to send things to John Savage being important, we chatted about John before. So it was a way of actually getting the ear of someone. We realised that sending tape, after a while we realised, you know, we'd only done a few gigs, so if you're sending tapes to Virgin or whatever, they're not going to really respond. But if we can get to journalists, then it might be a way of doing it. So I think that was the way. And it was at that point, there were things bubbling up. I mean, Richard Boone at New Hallman's was probably the key in that sense. We sent it to Richard Boone, and that's why we ended up doing our first London shows with the Buzzcocks, wasn't it? Remember that? Yeah. Eric's here. I met Eric that night. Eric?
That was another spicy evening, though, right? I mean,
well, for us it wasn't too bad because we came on first. Although I do remember doing that first gig. We turned up and kind of dumped our stuff on the Lyceum stage, and they were like, we'd no idea about DI boxes or anything like that. We were like, all right, where do we plug in? And they're going, what do you mean where do you plug in? You've got a fucking cassette machine, you've got no amps, you know, you've got a bit, there's no amplification. And they were really good, the people, because they did manage to get a sound out, and it was probably quite appalling what we heard, but we were all right, we got stuff. But because John Cooper Clark, he had an iron bar thrown at him that night, you know, so it was quite heavy.
Because it was like Slates, Buzzcocks, Cooper Clark and you guys, right?
Yeah,
Is that the bill? Yeah.
Yeah, what a night out.
All right, look, we're really tight on time, and I know we've probably got loads of big fans in the audience, so I want to open it up to you guys. But very quickly, before I take a question, just out of curiosity, given that we're here talking about the first Cab Gigs 50 years ago, just show of hands, is there anyone in the audience who was at that gig? Yes? Got one there? Amazing. Okay.
Is that my wife?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
She was security.
So I think we're going to have to nick one of your mics to do quick. So just, it's a little bit dark, but show of hands if you want to ask a question, please, and we'll take it from there. I know it's often everyone's a bit shy first time round, but come on.
Upstairs.
There we go.
No.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Did you have a sense, a feel of your impact then?
I'll let Chris answer this first.
No, of course not, because we were like young in our, early 20s, and it's great now to be here this evening and celebrate this. But no, at the time, it was sort of beyond belief. We were interested, we had this sense of outlet which we talked about, but with no sense of potentially what could happen. We had influences, and most of those influences, like I was saying, was things like the Velvet Underground, who know in Germany the work of Connie Plank, the producer Germany, and people, a wide range of music, but with no idea that we're creating something that would have a lasting effect. We just felt this need to, like many people do now, like many people, young kids do now, sort of express what we're interested in doing, which is very different from what we were listening to and looking at on then the sort of television and radio. As now, Maggie and I were looking after our grandkids last week in Edinburgh for a week. Freddie and Charlie were 10 and 7, and they come down in the mornings. We'd have to, because the parents had gone away for a week. We had to sort of get up and get them downstairs, get them dressed, and get them breakfast. And they couldn't put television on, and it was unbelievably crap what they were watching. And I thought, whatever we tried to do, like a lot of my work sort of failed miserably, because this is what the norm is. And it's just the same now. We just shouldn't accept and listen to or look at what's being presented to us.
I've got nothing nothing to add. I just agree with what Chris is saying. Yeah. But no, in answer to that question, no, I think we lived in the present, we lived in the moment. I don't think we really looked towards what it would be. I think we just literally did that. We lived day to day, and it was kind of, life was an adventure, and we just kind of took it like that. But yeah, it was a resistance to what was around us, and that's how change happens. So yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, man.
Any more hands anywhere? Yeah, I think just over here, please.
I'm just really curious about Dada and how important Dada was right at the beginning.
Massively important, because it was, I think it was a, I mean, Chris, I'll let Chris kind of speak as well about this, but for me it felt like Dada, and then later actually Fluxus, known about Fluxus, they offered templates for change. I mean, they were almost like manifestos. And you said, did we have a plan? And I jokingly said we had a manifesto. We kind of did, in the sense that Dada was a manifesto for us because it was a resistance to power, to authority. It was kind of anti-bourgeois. It's obviously anti-war because of the time it was there. And so it kind of, that was, but the sentiments that Dada offered were relevant towards in our time, so that became our kind of benchmark, I think, our default kind of way of looking at things. And I think it's important because I think for us, Chris, I'm sure it's the same, you never want to lose it. It becomes a touchstone. You need to continually refer to that and to make sure that you don't lose sight of where you're at. It's like it gave us roots, and that was really important.
And just to interject, I'll come back to the audience in a second. I guess one thing that we haven't touched upon, we're talking about the anniversary in the past year, but this is also a benchmark for like a next stage milestone. You guys have just announced that you're going to be performing together for the first time. Chris left the band in 1981, and you're going to be playing an already sold out show later in October. So do you want to talk us through what was the decision behind wanting to do that and getting back together, and how are you feeling about that? What was the impetus to do this?
I mean, for me, I contacted Chris to say I wanted to do it and I just would love him to be involved. For me, the impetus was that it feels like it was an opportunity really to just kind of present that work and Richard's work. It's difficult. We've lost Richard, and it's really quite a big thing. But I think for me it was a case of the only way I could kind of like still really capture that was to be able to go out and play those and make sure, it's funny actually because people keep, have asked, what would Richard think? And Richard wouldn't like it. Richard would hate this, sorry. He'd fucking hate this. He'd beat the bar. But the thing is, and that's fair enough because Richard wanted to look forward and he didn't look backwards. But I think the funny thing is also, I did say, but he would have loved the attention, because I think, and that's the key to it, Cabaret Voltaire have now, on reflection, are important, and Richard's work was important, and I don't want that to die. So for me, that was the main thing. Richard and Chris and myself to be able to do it. Well, we've got a chance to do it, so I just didn't want it to wither on the vine, really. And I asked Chris if he wanted to come and do some of the shows, and he said, yeah. Excellent.
Any more questions from the audience? Anywhere?
Upstairs.
Yeah, just here, please. Thank you.
I keep shouting for your hand.
He's involved with the Now Society at Sheffield University in the 70s. And you remember we put on several times, we put on Throb and Gristle, and loads of other bands basically. So do you want to talk a bit about that university connection, since we're at an event about the university? Because there was quite a strong link between the university and the bands at the time, I think. And a lot of the people at the university formed bands subsequently, such as Ron, who played earlier. Ron was a student doing, I'm not sure what he was doing actually. None of us knew what anybody else was doing. Huh?
You did English Lit.
English Lit, that's right, yes.
It was in English Lit, didn't you, Ron?
Yeah, it was English.
I tell you what,
So a little bit of context for everyone there. Now SOC is the Now Society, which was founded in 1978, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that was effectively a platform for a lot of experimental underground gigs that were put on at the university. And again, there was Cabs and Frog and Gristle played together at a headline show in 1980 that I think was pretty groundbreaking for a lot of people. But yeah, so
we also put on people like Teardrop Explode.
Yeah.
Liverpool, we put on Thompson Twins, who were from Chesterfield at the time. And they were doing like Bebop Deluxe kind of stuff. So it didn't go down very well. So all their fans came in and sat on the floor, which nobody else ever did. But yeah, those university traditions, maybe that's of interest to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, regards and respect to Ron, who taught my daughter when she was at Sheffield College.
Ron taught me as well.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
You taught me how to make onion barges, or lived in the house in Hilton.
Yeah, I mean, Sheffield University, the music department, played a massive part, like I said, from the start. I mean, I can't even remember the year, but that's when they gave us public access, as it was, to this unique instrument, which we would never, you know, as working class kids from Sheffield have access to. And that was the sort of the key, you know, to unlock a lot of our imagination and development. I have to say also, one of my proudest achievements was to get an honorary doctorate from Sheffield University. So I am actually a doctor of music for 2019, which is a paradox in itself. I was very pleased. And in fact, Richard came to my graduation. Yeah, left very quickly. But he was there momentarily.
Anybody? Sorry, Miles, you want to ask?
I was going to just say, just to Jeff, yeah, I mean, it was massively kind of sort of important, really, because it was a space and an opportunity to do it. I mean, and Ian Anderson was obviously involved as well, Designers Republic, so, but they were part of the anarchic spirit, but also the university. I know it's not the same now. I mean, it's great this is on here, we've got the drama studio, but the thing is, university was part of our social life, I mentioned before. We used to have forge union cards. It was before I went to union. We used to forge union cards, because we used to come in and see, you know, whoever it might be. Remember seeing Kraftwerk downstairs in the lower refectory, yeah, Motorhead, yeah. We saw all kinds of bands. So university was central to the kind of social life of the city. But in terms of interesting things, you know, it would, you know, there were the better band, you know, the bands that came through. So the university itself was, and now society were obviously that kind of more iconoclastic kind of part of that music scene, and it was vastly important. And Bar 2 was, and it was essentially we used to go down there, you know, so it was really good, yeah. Yeah, and I think also there was like a section. The funny thing is, there was like I'm sure there was second and third generations, but people started to come to Sheffield because the bands that were here, you know, Jack and all that, you know, there you go. People, yeah, Nigel, some people used to go, yeah, fucking hell, I want to go to Sheffield because there's some right weird bands there. So, yeah, so it's good. And Chris is so deserving of a doctorate from the university. So it's good. Mine's in the post, I think. But I did write me home, so I'm all right.
Okay, we're pretty much there for time. Has anyone got a really? Is it a good last question? Can we go to someone who hasn't already asked? Would that be okay to finish off?
Upstairs.
Upstairs.
Upstairs here.
Hello. Famous Alan. It's Alan from BT in Sheffield. I know.
Oh, hang on, sorry, we've got two voices at once here. Just one, we'll come back to Alan 1 second. Down here, very quickly.
I was just going to ask if there was like a contemporary Cabaret Voltaire, what would they be like?
I don't know, because Richard's not here, and that's the whole thing we do. I'm doing the part doing the shows. I want to do the shows to be able to play kind of the history of the band. I mean, I agree with Richard. I'm not into nostalgia, but the same point we've got to make is the Cabaret Voltaire did represent a moment in time, and history is not just about the past; it's about change, and we were part of that big point in change. So I'm quite happy doing the old tracks, but there is no new stuff because Richard isn't here, and I wouldn't attempt to do any old really new stuff. I don't know what it would sound like. I mean, Richard didn't recoil, kind of go quite into himself later, and he did that kind of stuff. But I don't know. It would have been lovely to have really found out, but sadly we lost him, and we never will. But there won't be another future Cabaret Voltaire because the key part of it is gone.
Yeah. We don't look for it yet. We're going to have to call it down. I'm really sorry, guys.
Oh, no.
What? Just one more. Alan.
Yeah, sorry, we're done. Yeah, all right, thank you guys, and thank you. Chris Watson, Michelle Mallinder.
Give him a microphone and take it off him.
I know.
The microphone and everything.
It's a really important question as well. He's got a really old demo cassette that he did with Chris before the Cabs sort of really got to be the Cabs. He's got it with him tonight. He wants to give it to Chris.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He used to work with Chris at BT years ago.
Yeah. You can't take that away from him.
No. He'll meet him. I'm sure we'll get to see him downstairs. But it would have been good to share it though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That's a shame. Last question, is that?
Yeah. It's the trouble being upstairs, isn't it?
Yeah. They finished it, it was good.
I don't think so.